Hey, what's up everyone, it's Duskmos, and today I'm here with the Pedal Brainz Left Brain CV. Let's check it out. This micro-sized little box of wonder is a psychedelic CV controller that works based on light patterns that flash with LEDs behind these three knobs that are then reacting with photoreceptors that then will translate those light patterns into control voltage that you can then use to control anything that can receive CV. So on the face of the Pedal Brainz CV, you've got two buttons that are basically your navigation for your different modes and light patterns and things like that. And then you've got these three knobs labeled with the 1, 2, and 3. They control various parameters depending on what mode you're in. And behind each knob, that are each, as you can see, is clear, is actually the light. So you'll see the LEDs shine through in different colors through each of the knobs. On the back or top, you can see there are these two CV outputs on 3.5mm jacks, as well as a 9V like pedal power input. On the side here, you've got an expression or eye selector, which will let you switch between reading the light patterns from the LEDs on the top to just using this as an expression. And I guess while we're on this side, there you can see there's scale or inverted or standard selection for your expression value here. On the front facing side, you've got this selector for plus or plus and minus. So this controls the voltage, whether or not you allow it to go into the negative range or just keep it from 0 to plus or positive voltage. So some of the things that these three knobs control in the different modes are things like LED brightness, which varies the amount of basically voltage change that's going to be picked up by the receivers. You can change the speed of the pattern of like the way the lights flick, the randomness. You can also control things like chance, duration, also things like hue, which would just change the response. It's all very interesting and all a very different way to send out control or expression or CV to your other gear. So I think what serves us best probably is just to get it hooked up and see what this thing can do. So as you can see, I've got the left brain here set up with a pedal and a synth. The pedal is the Fairfield Circuitry Long Life, which is a tilt EQ / filter pedal. It's even a synth voice, which is pretty crazy. If you haven't seen my video on this, check it out for sure. But I selected it because right on top here, you've got a CV jack for filter cutoff and a CV jack for the resonance or Q. And yes, this does have a expression control, and there is an expression version of the left eye, but this is just a good starting point. And then over here, we've got the model cycles. That's going to be providing my sound source in a sort of creepy sounding little loop that I'm going to send through the Long Life and then out into the TX6 and then out into the camera. And I'm going to start without the left brain CV hooked up so we can just get a little bit of a feel for what this is doing already. And then we'll get it hooked up and see what this can do. All right, so here's the pattern. Fully clean. Like I said, it's kind of creepy. I've got an LFO on the cord, so it just kind of makes it wobble. Because why not? All right, we'll engage the Long Life. So right now I just had it set into a low pass with a decent amount of resonance. You hear that kind of emphasis on the cutoff point. So there we go. So you can see there's no modulation going on. There's no, LFO or anything going to the frequency cutoff. But now we're going to change that. So we're going to take our CV cable, hook into the filter control. And now you can see not much is happening because I have it set into kind of like a middle range here. And now you can really hear and see how this is controlling this knob. So it's kind of the same thing as like turning it up and down like this really fast. And that's what's cool about CV and modulation sources is that basically turns knobs for you. Now what's interesting is, here I'm setting the frequency cutoff to a range that is more reactive to what's going on here. But I can kind of do that here as well because this knob sort of works as a second control for whatever CV is being controlled. So I can kind of turn this down. Well, not kind of, I can. Sort of the same way as if I was turning that knob, which is cool. You can see the rate is tied to the light here, so it's reading the light on a photoreceptor inside this little box. And then an Arduino is controlling the light patterns and colors that the photoreceptor is reacting to. So we can change things like rate. You can see it's really flashing fast here. And hopefully the camera's picking it up. Frame rates and all that. You can really hear it dive bombing. And so different controls in these different modes will control the response. So you can hear there's a subtle change between like the blue and the red. Less dramatic of a difference between just the lit bluish white color and no light. So yeah, you can really see the colors have a lot of control over the signal that's going out, which is the whole premise of this pedal. And now you can see, like in this mode, for example, at this rate, it's a bit subtle for what we're doing here. So let's just change modes and let's check some other one out. So we'll change different pattern. You got things like speed. The different modes will have different controls, as I kind of mentioned in the intro. So you get different responses. You can find cool little patterns. You can see some like this one. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but it's kind of doing this little fade between the different colors, but staying relatively lit the whole time, which means you're just going to get kind of like just a really subtle change, which can add some interesting flavor depending on what it's controlling. I up the resonance so we can really see if we can kind of hear it even better. Subtlety. You can find interesting little patterns like I was saying. And you may not run this on a whole mix, for example, but you can run it on an instrument. And just add some variation to that track. You'll see that one's interesting. It just, yeah, it's going from passing a signal to not. In this case, you can hear it, so I turn it up a little bit. Very, very lowly, low passing. We can play with things like speed. See if we can speed this one up. Actually, speed's probably here. This is brightness, which is usually tied to like intensity of the range. And some of these you can control depending on what mode. The time between sort of no lights and lights on, lights off. Or how randomly they kind of sputter on and off. It's pretty cool, and it's very much an experimental experience. You see, this one's very fluttery. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Lots of range, lots of experimentation can be had, which is really fun. All right, now let's get it set up with something a little bit more interesting. Okay, so as you can see, now I'm back with the Left Brain CV, and I've added the Moog Subharmonicon, which is a semi-modular analog polyrhythmic synthesizer. That's a mouthful. And it's a really quirky, weird little synth, and I've always wanted to check one out, and I've actually borrowed this one. So it's not mine. It's probably the only video this is going to show up in, but I thought it would be cool, and it fits because there's a lot of CV action going on this side of the synth. So I thought it would be perfect to pair up with the Left Brain CV. We've got lots of control here for the VCO pitches. We've got cutoff of the filter. We even have rhythm control and some interesting stuff here that you can do, and sub oscillator controls and things like that. So we're going to really try and see what kind of weirdness we can do by modulating these inputs with the Left Brain. So I've got the Subharmonicon going straight into the TX6 and then going out into the camera. And I've got a little bit of reverb on it right now. I'll probably change up the characteristics of what's going on with some of the dials here and maybe some of the rhythmic stuff as well as the effects going on. So I've got reverb on it right now, but I might change it to a delay. We're just going to experiment, but I'll try to make it clear what's happening every time that something changes so you know what the Left Brain is doing. Okay, so I'm going to start with the clean pattern, which sounds like this. And by clean, I guess I mean unmodulated. That's what we're working with. So now I'm going to take the Left Brain and I'm going to plug in the CV control into the cutoff of the filter. So we'll kind of have a little bit of a, I don't know, it's like a callback to the first setup here. So we can do that. And as you can see, as it goes dark, the filter cuts out. And the different colors of lights will change the value along the way. And again, like on my first example, you can manually control this. Bring it down even more. And there's interactivity with the knob as well. So like, if I have it all the way cut off, because this is voltage going positive and negative, we can fully mute it or reintroduce or open the cutoff window. If that makes sense. I'm kind of playing with the range in essence. So we'll change to a different pattern here, or a light pattern on the left Brainz CV. This one's a little bit more of a gentle. Oh, there you go, a little bit of extreme. A really cool way to introduce some randomized modulation. And again, with the randomness, you know, you might not want to rely on it for like synced rhythmic stuff as far as like when it, you know, cuts off or whatever, but it's cool for different applications and different elements. That's kind of cool going into this big reverb. Hear those little blips. Okay, now to get extra weird, taking out the filter cutoff. We'll open up a little bit on the synth, but we'll go into the actual VCO2 pitch control. I went VCO2 first because it's sort of obviously the secondary voice here. So you can hear VCO1 stays persistent, but you have this background pitch getting all weird because of the CV. Let's switch it now to VCO1. You're getting these crazy experimental pitch bends. And then back to normal. Go into a sub-control VCO2. Interesting. Go to VCO1. Crazy giving you pitch control on a knob here that can get a little wobbly and weird. Back to little stabs here. So you can make this kind of a performative thing where you know, tweak the knob on some kind of voice or some kind of filter or something like that, where you can, I don't know, set this up in a really interesting way, I think, and also have the randomness going on. So you hear this one cycling through a little bit more of a gentler voltage pitch range. Well, voltage range that's converted to pitch because that's what we've fed it to. Let's move this to cutoff. By clicking these buttons, you can go up or down a page in preset. So one thing that's kind of cool, here we'll change up the sounds here. Let's find something new. That's cool, so you can see we've got a pretty steady pattern going. But now I can actually plug into rhythm 1, 2, 3, or 4. And now we're controlling the rhythm. You kind of see that reflected in these step lights here. So it's varying this pattern. I'm also going to switch to a delay now. Because why not? So you can see, so the CV is actually varying the speed as it cycles through, which is pretty interesting. And what else is interesting is because there's two CV outs, I'll plug in a second one, and we'll We'll go ahead and freak out this VCO2. So at the same time that this is going to change the weird rhythm, it's also going to change the pitch of VCO2. When I manually move this down, not only am I causing it to slow, but also the pitch to go lower, which is also what these are modulating as well. I'm just kind of overriding it by manually just twisting the knob. I'm going to switch banks. That was an interesting one. Switch banks, you can double tap, double click. This one's moving very slow. Some of these it's cool just to sit around and see what it's going to do, because it's programmed in a certain way, but they're always a little, I don't know, inspiring and interesting, depending on how you have it set up. Of course, you can tweak them. Let's try a different preset here. So that's a slower fade in and out. Switch banks again. I'm going to leave the rhythm where we have it set, so that'll stay steady now that I've removed that. But I'll go into the cutoff. So now we're controlling cutoff and pitch of VCO2. So we'll find a more dramatic preset here. So it's cool because I might not have thought to change the pitch and the cutoff manually on the Subharmonicon to get this sort of bassy filtered pattern here, but like I stumbled into it because of this. I think that's one of the strongest suits of why having a funky little device like this around is a really cool and inspiring thing. Okay, so in this third and final setup, I've got the Subharmonicon back, but I've also introduced the Mood Mark II from Chase Bliss, and that's going to be adding the effect layer to the Subharmonicon, but I'm going to be controlling it over the CV input with the left brain CV. So let's hear what the Subharmonicon sounds like before impacted by the Mood. And I don't have it hooked up to the Mood yet, or I don't have this hooked up to the Mood yet because I want to hear what the Mood can do without it, and then we'll add this into the mix. So this is just the Subharmonicon clean. We'll go ahead and introduce the Mood. Let's get the long tail reverb on there. Slowing the clock speed down. Now I'm going to hook in the CV control, but I don't have it set to anything. You have to go on the back of the Chase Bliss stuff to the dip switches. But I'm going to make this control the clock speed. Let's see. Oh, I got two of them there. It's hard to do with big fingers. Okay, so now you can see it's set to clock. Maybe you can see that, maybe you can't. So now let's reactivate the Mood. So you can hear when these lights dim, it was slowing the clock speed. Let's try a different pattern here. Tweak this one. There we go. Just doing the same thing as getting all weird on the clock knob on the Mood. But again, you can override. Change the cutoff a little bit. What's interesting is this is kind of doing some lossy type sounds by going into the low clock speeds and glitching. Really cool way to add some variation. But one thing to note that I didn't is the Chase Bliss stuff only wants positive voltage, so I switched it from the negative and positive to just a positive. It's going from 0 to 5 volts. And I also inverted the polarity because it in standard mode it made it so that down was like the fully opened knob and then up was closed, so I wanted it to perform the opposite. So it's cool flexibility. Change up our rhythm here a little bit just for the fun of it. So now I'm going to switch the mode to delay. And that's a pretty wild response. It's changing the clock speed that is affecting the playback of the delay repeats. Switching to slip mode. Switch the Drolo side of the mood into stretch. Not an envelope. This mode's a bit more subtle. Let's go back to reverb. Change up the pattern on the left brain. It's pretty wild. Turn on a little reverb on the TX6 again, but can't really hear it much. Change banks. Very glitchy. It sounds like a modem. Well, we can also, again, utilize the second output, and actually we'll make it the cutoff on the Subharmonicon. Now we're cooking. Oh, it's reversed now, so means it's the right polarity for expression or the voltage direction on the mood, but inverse for the sub. That's funny. And that's just a big old crazy interesting modulated control with both of these devices, courtesy of the Pedal Brainz Left Brain CV. Just a little turn of the knob, you're getting very different responses. So what are my final thoughts on the Left Brain CV from Pedal Brainz? Well, I think it's a really inspiring little box. I mean, this little thing with its dual CV outputs controlling pitch and cutoff and even like the rate on the Subharmonicon of the rhythms, really just wild and interesting. And it's cool that it's as flexible as it is with the, I guess, up to 2 outputs, but then also being able to use it as just normal expression or with the light control. Obviously going positive and negative on the voltage range makes it, universal for a lot more pieces of gear. And inverted or standard mode and scale, and everything about this is just a really interesting little mod box that is kind of hard to explain. I mean, when you think about the lights being the source of the modulation, that's just so non-standard that it's really kind of hard to get across what's going on. But I think it's a unique thing. It's sort of like, I don't know, it kind of puts me in the world of like the D-beam of the Roland days, if you remember those. Like back in the 90s, that was on a lot of the, in early 2000s, I guess, a lot of the Roland boxes like MC 808 and those groove boxes and stuff. Kind of a cool thing. Also, what reminds me a little bit of like that, I think it was Alesis made that like kind of orb thing that was also an effect box that you would hover over like air effects or something. I don't remember if that's what it was called, but I do remember being a kid and playing with that stuff in Guitar Center and just my mind being blown at the landscape at the time. And this kind of takes me back to those days. Like, it just is weird and funky and playful. And like I said, it's inspirational. Like, it definitely kind of opens up the door to some more creative outputs. And I think using it in like a modular rack, like I know, you can CV control like sample playback and start positions and all that. And I think that would be really interesting to tweak with this. And yeah, I don't have Euro rack, so I'm not too ready to demo something like that in that kind of world, in that context. But between the pedals and synths and stuff, like I got that covered. And I think that alone is a lot of fun and definitely would be enough to warrant checking one of these out. So yeah, definitely give it a look if you're interested in doing what this thing can do. And I really appreciate Pedal Brainz for sending this out for me to demo on the channel. I think it's a really cool device, and I don't know, I think it's just, like I said, one of the most unique and interesting and kind of inspiring little boxes that I've had the pleasure of checking out on the channel. And I could see it being kind of like a secret weapon for people, because you see this on somebody's rig and you're like, what is that little thing doing? So anyway, Yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.